outlining kind of the process. One of the things we've heard from the board is we just intend to have this a brief session for not any longer than 30 minutes. Just with Joyce opening it up and also with representatives here from Pearson. They were paying many questions. We received several questions. We tried to categorize the ones, some that were more appropriate for the session, and those that were. But then it comes back to you for further dialogue, and then as time goes on, back to the public and the audience for further questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Krosky. Thank you.
Madam Chair, as both you and the Commissioner pointed out, the purpose of today's presentation is to support CDE in responding to State Board requests for information regarding the data collection for the Colorado Measures of Academic Success, CMAS. That does cover our science and social studies assessments, as well as our English language arts and mathematics assessments. Pearson is prepared to talk within the scope of our contract. To my left is Walter Sherwood. He is president of Pearson State Assessment Services. Next to him is Jim Hill, vice president of Pearson State Assessment Services. And next to me on the right is Randy Schisler, vice president, Assessment Technology Services. In terms of the opening part of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it is that we do student data collection and how that data will be used. Then Walter will address contract security requirements as well as key statements. And then we will go back and forth addressing the questions that were submitted by the public. As you may recall at your last board meeting, you requested that we open up a website so the public could submit their questions. We have categorized those in broad categories, and we'll address them as appropriate. There are some questions that we will not address. They dealt with issues outside of the CMAS data collection, but we do want to let you know that we will be posting an FAQ that will address every question that we received. Broad category number one. Why is student data collected and how will it be used? The questions submitted by the public were, why do you need it, the student data? Who decided what data would be collected? Why does Pearson need to collect information beyond the state ID, SACID, student name, grade, and school? Does Pearson really need to know students have IEPs and the specific disability of a student? Why do you feel it's your moral and ethical right to collect information on my child beyond test results? How will the data be disaggregated, i.e. by race, age, gender, school attended, test scores, etc.? To what purpose is the data collected? How will CDE and Pearson be using the data? Will student data be used to develop any products, including but not limited to the PARCC assessment? At a high level, here's our response to those questions. They will also be further addressed throughout the presentation. The assessment data is collected so that we can provide information to parents on their child's attainment of the grade level skills and concepts found in the Colorado academic standards. The state assessments serve as an external benchmark used across the state. It is the only consistent assessment that is used across the state. So as we're looking at our students meeting the expectations set by the standards, this is the only assessment that answers that for all of our students. The data is also used to support the evaluation of schools and districts under both state and federal law. Both state and federal law require that we report out results by subgroups. As an example, gender, race, ethnicity, language proficiency, disability category, accommodations, migrants, etc. Every piece of student data that we collect, we are required to collect either under state or federal requirements. We report out that information by subgroup to ensure that no subgroup's performance is being masked by another group's performance. Example, historically, we did not have accurate information about how students with disabilities were performing because their performance was masked by the overall student group. You can see some of the reports that we put out at the website specified on the slide. We post results on our assessment website that does report out at the state level as well as at the district level by these subgroups. Anyone is welcome to go look at that website and they can see all of the categories. Again, this is very open, very transparent. Demographic information is also used to evaluate the quality of our assessment items, and this helps us to ensure the assessments are indeed fair, valid, and reliable. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Walter Sherwood.
Thank you, Joyce. Madam Chair, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm going to make a couple of general overview statements that are, in a lot of ways, guiding principles about our data privacy, data security, and data collection efforts around the Colorado contract and our state assessment contracts in general. Before I do that, I know Joyce introduced me. Again, I'm Walter Sherwood, the president of our state assessment services. I'm responsible for our student assessment programs. Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you. So Pearson is a contractor to the state of Colorado and abides by the requirements of that contract. The student information from the Colorado State Assessments is the property of the state. It is not owned by Pearson and cannot be used by Pearson in any manner not authorized by the state. Student data security and privacy is foremost in our execution of contract requirements. Our policies, our systems, our processes, our controls and monitoring are designed to protect unauthorized use of student data. We continually collaborate with all of our state customers to refine and improve any processes or policies related to student information, security, and privacy. And a couple things that we don't do. We do not share any student information used in our assessment programs unless requested or authorized by the state. We do not share state assessment information within Pearson or as partners for the purposes of product development or marketing. And we do not sell any state assessment student information to anyone. I wanted to touch on a couple of the key provisions within the contract with Colorado. Pearson is contracted to perform an essential function of the state of Colorado. It is providing services at the direction of CDE and in compliance with state and federal policy and legal requirements. Pearson is bound by contract to comply with the student data protection measures that Colorado has prescribed. The student data protection requirements of Colorado's contract with Pearson are rigorous, detailed, and are thoroughly addressed throughout the hundreds of pages of the contract. CDE's information security and privacy policy and specific contract terms with Pearson can be accessed online at the website provided here. Pearson is also bound by the contract to handle student data within the confines of and subject to the requirements of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, as well as Student Data Protection, Accessibility, Transparency, and Accountability Act of 2014. Key provisions within the contract with Colorado include confidentiality. Pearson is bound by comprehensive confidentiality terms, which prohibit the sale, distribution, or retention of confidential information and require Pearson to maintain a secure environment. Restricted use. Pearson may not use any data generated through the assessments for its own purposes. Employee preparation. Pearson employees who handle student data must undergo background checks, receive training, including a security awareness program, and sign confidentiality agreements. Security protocols. Colorado prescribes stringent security protocols for electronic transmission, shipping, accessing, storing, and destruction of secure materials. And you'll note that the references to those provisions within the contract are listed here on the website or on the slide.
Going back to some of the questions that were submitted through the online survey. At a broad level, these next questions deal with what student data is collected. Questions submitted by the public. Exactly what data are you collecting? What data do you collect? What type of data is actually collected? what data is being collected. What data are you collecting on the PARCC testing? What info will be collected? Complete list, please. I like the definitive list of exactly what data is being collected and whether it's being collected anonymously, not tied to my child's PII, or if it'll become part of his record in your database. Why it's being collected and with whom it'll be sold to and or shared. Why do they need to identify specific students' ID? What data is collected, including PII, non-PII, metadata, paradata, social, behavioral, emotional, psychometrics, any and all information or data that can be collected online when a child is logged on for a CMAS or PARCC test. Randy.
Good morning, pleasure to be here. My name is Randy Schisler. I oversee technology delivery for our state large-scale assessment programs. So that includes the configuration, setup, and operation of the technology supporting programs such as CMAS. So it's an honor to be here. I'd like to provide transparency to the questions that have been asked, specifically about the data we collect. To make this simple, we've tried to organize the data into 5 specific areas. The first 2 are covered on this slide. The first area is what we consider the identity data that helps us identify a specific student to make sure that a test is being assigned to the individual. So the 5 key points of identification data are, of course, the name of the student, the SACID, the state level identifier, optionally a local school identifier, the date of birth, and the gender. And these criteria together give a high confidence match that we have the correct student receiving the correct assessment. The second category of identity data data that we collect is the registration data associated with a specific assessment, in this case CMAS, co-op, etc. This data is required for state and federal reporting of the assessment results for specific administrations. And this is often referred to as the demographic data that we talked about. And all of these data are outlined in our contract as well as a requirement specification for collection. So the data as shown on the right here are the testing district in school, which often may, or in some cases may differ from where the student will be reporting at a different district in school. The testing grade, race and ethnicity, and then the federal race, ethnicity, and reporting field, economic status, 504 plan, migrant, immigrant, language background, primary disability, homeless, language proficiency, bilingual, English as a second language, Colorado continuously, continuous in district, continuous in school, date most recently enrolled in the U.S., expelled, gifted, talented, IEP, Title I, and October new to a school. And several of those fields are required to be provided before a student can begin an assessment. And most importantly, those are the testing school and district, the testing grade. So these layouts are available on CDE's website at the address shown at the bottom of the page. The third area where we collect data then is as a student is about to take a test. So we need to identify specific test administration information as well as any accommodations that the student is to receive. So specifically the test being administered, a testing group that the student may be in for testing, and any accommodations. So this may include presentation such as text-to-speech, color contrast, Spanish audio, response type accommodations such as providing a written response as an alternative mechanism, and any accommodations around timing or settings, such as extended time that an individual may need. The fourth area for which we collect data is what we call device and response data. So this is data that is collected during the testing for the purposes of scoring, any technical troubleshooting that we need to do, as well as any anomaly analysis around the test delivery. Specifically, the data that we collect are information about the device, so the type of device being used, such as a tablet, a Chromebook, a PC, a browser, the operating systems, the network IP address, as well as any error codes that are encountered during the test delivery. Most importantly, we collect the responses from the students. That includes not only the most recent response, but all previous responses that the student selected during the session. We also auto-save any essay responses every 2 minutes as a protection to make sure we have their latest responses. As a student navigates from item to item, certain items have tools which can be used. We are required to maintain that tool state information so that if a student navigates back to that item, the tools such as a highlighter or notepad or item eliminator are still in the same state they were when they previously saw that item. And it doesn't get reset back to an originating state. We collect timestamps at key points throughout the test. So the test start and end as they navigate through screens, as well as the times of all of their responses. We collect the total time on item. We collect status then about the item on whether it was viewed, not viewed, answered, or not answered. And then we collect an overall status of the test itself. Is it ready? Is it active? Has it already been exited? Resumed status, and is it completed? And then the fifth area which we collect student data is the category of post-test data. And this is data that tries to identify why a student might not have fully reportable testing data. So there may be reasons why a student didn't test, a reason to avoid the test, and any associated reporting codes that have been prescribed by the state. So also to answer a little bit to other questions about what information is collected from students online. Students, when they sign into our system to take a test, use a randomly generated username and password that is assigned to that specific student's name. The students do not provide any personally identifiable information. And all the device and response data is collected at the time of testing. Now, in addition to the assessment itself, we do collect survey data from students, but this is optional and de-identified to the student. So they're given an opportunity to provide feedback on the online testing experience so that it can help inform decisions about how to improve the system that includes the assessment and the technology. So they are asked questions regarding their testing experience. Were they able to navigate through the system? Were the tools helpful? How did the level of difficulty of the test compare to typical classwork? And about the frequency of computer use in the home and at the school. And this is open-ended feedback from the students that help us improve the system. And these surveys are connected with live assessments. They are optional, and they are either delivered separately, and there is no student PII associated with this attached to the survey results. And we've provided links to those surveys on the sites that the links shown there.
What types of data are not collected? A question submitted by the public. What data will be collected and will it become intrusive in family matters? Will data hacks occurring more frequently? It's highly unlikely people will be comfortable having data collected about entire families, their habits, their views, their lives. What assurances that are believable will we have that sensitive data would be safe? Do they ask for any private data from students other than name, age, grade, school identification number? If so, what and why? As a side note, I have instructed my daughter to answer no personal questions on assessments other than her name, date of birth, and gender. There are no other personal questions that I consider to be the business of the state or feds.
This is perhaps one of the most important topics we present today to address public concerns as well as the correct misinformation that may be distributed about the assessment program. So we want to be very clear and transparent about the types of data that we do not collect. Data that we do not collect include any type of national identifier, such as social security number, military ID, green card number, no information about addresses for the student, no online addresses, such as email, social media addresses, Twitter, Facebook, no academic records, courses, grades, other test scores, no disciplinary or criminal records, no medical or health records, no biological traits or pictures, no non-academic personal information such as family members, religious or political affiliation, any sexual behaviors, gun ownership, drug use, illegal activity, or anything of the sort, and We do no stealth technology monitoring. We do no keyboard logging, no cameras on the devices during testing.
How is data stored, protected, and accessed? Question submitted by the public. How exactly, where exactly, what exactly is the data collected on my children stored, and who has access to it? How is it, student data, protected? Do any of the technical support functions for PARCC reside outside of the United States? If so, how is data protected, as these support staff from Pearson have access to all student data? Target, Home Depot, Blue Cross Blue Shield, National Archive and Records Administration, Epsilon, Evernote, Living Social. None of them could keep our data safe. What makes you think we're going to trust you to keep our children's data safe? With the regular security breaches we see in major companies, Anthem, Chase, Home Depot, Target, etc., why, not how, do you perceive the data collected will be secure? Who has access to it? The student data.
So Pearson, particularly in its assessment business, has put in rigorous controls to help manage risk to our customers, employees, and any company-sensitive information and operations. We have an information security management system, sometimes referred to as an ISMS, that's based on the widely used ISO 27001, 27002 standards. We have a risk management framework that's based on the ISO 3100 risk management framework. I'll cover more in depth on the following slides, but we have state-of-the-art technologies to help implement it in our systems and our operating procedures that include the encryption of all data in motion at rest, role-based security, real-time security monitoring, and proactive security vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. And then we have a security operations center that works for the detection, identification, rapid response, escalation, and resolution of security and privacy incidents. Some of the state-of-the-art technologies that we use: a multi-level firewall infrastructure to monitor and control network traffic attempting to communicate with Pearson, intrusion prevention systems to further monitor and restrict traffic on Pearson's internal network, anti-distributed denial of service systems that help block malicious network attacks. As you may know, some of those have occurred in the last week for another statewide assessment program from another provider. Strong data encryption, AES 256, which is applied to the database and to all data links. So as a student is transmitting data to us, as well as communications between each of our servers. Internal vulnerability testing to scan for vulnerabilities in our applications and all our network devices. Then we have an external vulnerability and penetration tests that are performed by third parties that we hire to intentionally attack our systems, identify weaknesses, and attempt to gain access to our systems. And then we have many more technologies, too many to list here, but include email and network information monitoring, secure wireless, mobile device control, laptop security, segmented private networks, etc. As far as the actual technology servers that host the data, that have the data for Colorado, as well as the data centers on which those equipment reside. Our production servers have enhanced security, which is often referred to as hardening of the devices, to the industry best practices for security. Each of those devices is audited regularly to verify that the operating system and software components are kept current with updates and security and configuration standards. And our applications in production are continuously scanned by a third party for security vulnerabilities. Our data centers are all US based with multiple levels of physical security. So no data resides outside of the United States. And at those data centers, they have multiple levels of physical control. A few listed here are restricted access, which is controlled by ID card systems, which permit access to the hardware. Closed circuit television systems monitoring access and viewing by facility security guards and staff. And then all physical security controls meet the security requirements as described in the contract. And then finally, unlike the event of a disaster, we have a recovery process that's based on ISO 2301 standards. and then to address concerns about the technology as well as the people within Pearson that have access to student data. Our technology system components can only access specific student data as needed to complete their function. So for example, the test delivery system, TestNav, has no access to student personally identifiable information. So this helps minimize the risk of sensitive data being compromised in the unlikely event of a particular component being penetrated. Our system logging enables forensic analysis on accesses and change to student data. So we know how data was modified, either manually or in an automated means by a system, and can track that. And we track all extracts from student data from our repositories. Only authorized US-based individuals have access to student data and on a need-to-know basis. And that includes, most importantly, our specific staff assigned to work on the specific program. So that's program team, technology folks, our psychometric staff, and tech writers who are helping clarify the administration for the test administrators. Then our call center, we have what we consider level 2 technical support. And those staff help administrators with more detailed technical issues that they are having. So they need to be able to see exactly what a test administrator is seeing on their screens in order to help resolve any issues that they may be encountering. At a more detailed level, if we have an issue with a product technology component in the production environment, there are support staff to research specific data issues. They generally have no access to student identity data, only to specific information that component technology uses. And then finally, our operations staff that handle any printed paper materials, such as printing of reports, packaging, and scanning of the 1% of the tests that we do receive via paper. On Colorado's staff, we've outlined who has access on this slide. The Department of Education defines specific user roles for accessing student data within Pearson Access, which is our online system for managing the test administration. Comprehensive student data is only accessible by specific individuals responsible for the overall assessment and enrollment at their respective organizational levels. So some of the roles that are defined within the system are the district assessment coordinator. They have access to all data, and those district assessment coordinators are assigned by CDE. Those that have the role of student enrollment or have a sensitive data add-on role, that is access to sensitive data such as race and ethnicity. The school assessment coordinator, which has access to identity data but not sensitive student data, unless also assigned the student enrollment role or the sensitive data add-on, as well as the test administrator, who needs to access the student identity data but not sensitive data unless they have the student enrollment role.
Madam Chair, I just, the purposes of kind of putting a bookend on where we started and the details that Randy just went back over, it's going to reiterate the statements that I made earlier around the summary of our guidelines and contractual requirements around the data collection. Again, Pearson is a contractor with the state of Colorado and abides by the requirements of that contract. Student information from the Colorado State Assessment is the property of the state. It's not owned by Pearson and cannot be used by Pearson in any manner not authorized by the state. Student data security and privacy is foremost in our execution of the contract. Our policies, our systems, our processes, our controls and monitoring are designed to protect the unauthorized use of student data